The scene moved to the warm, bustling interior of Belden's Tier, where laughter and chatter filled the tavern, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere that had clung to Derrick earlier. Behind the counter, Jiden raised a glass of amber-colored wine, a playful grin on his face. "Honey wine," he said, his tone teasing. "The nobles pretend it's all refined and proper when they drink it, but you always liked it, didn't you?" Derrick offered a quiet nod, accepting the gesture. Jiden waved his hand dismissively, his voice carrying lightly through the room. "Consider this a welcome drink. On the house." Pauline, standing nearby, watched him closely, her eyes narrowing as if studying him. After a pause, she asked, a hint of curiosity lacing her words, "Were you always this pale, or did the nobles drain you further?" Derrick tilted his head slightly, a trace of confusion on his face. Not fully understanding her implication, he remained silent. Pauline's smirk widened as she leaned in, teasing. "When I heard you became a magic teacher, I imagined the nobles must all be taking some strange potion together or something. So, what happened? Tell me," she pressed, eager for a story. Derrick's response was calm, measured. "I just worked there. Nothing more to it." Pauline's disbelief was exaggerated, leaning back with a dramatic smirk. "Wow. You talk just like one of them now. Couldn't you share a little more?" Before she could continue, Jiden intervened, placing a drink in front of her. "Pauline, that's enough. Just drink this." But Pauline's frustration spilled over. Slamming her hand on the table, she snapped, "I went through all that trouble working alone because he wasn't here. I'm so annoyed." Jiden glanced at Derrick and teased lightly, "Well, thanks to that, he must have brought back a fortune. Did they at least pay him well?" Derrick shook his head gently, his voice calm and even. "What I received is far more valuable than money." Jiden's brow furrowed in confusion. Before he could ask further, Derrick placed a book carefully on the table. As Jiden caught sight of it, his eyes widened in astonishment. Leaning closer, he whispered, disbelief tinged in his voice, "What, could this be a star spell book?" Pauline leaned forward, her curiosity instantly piqued. Her voice trembled with excitement as she exclaimed, "Something this rare?" Derrick, however, remained calm, cutting through their assumptions. "No," he said simply. "It's a 3-star spellbook." The words hung in the air and both Pauline and Jiden froze, utterly stunned. Jiden's eyes widened as disbelief overtook him. "Did you steal it? If anyone caught you with something like that, you'd be finished." Pauline, in stark contrast, practically sparkled with excitement. Her grin widened and she practically shouted, "Who cares about stealing? It's a 3-star spellbook. I want one too. Where is it?" Seeing their intense reactions, Derrick calmly clarified the situation. "The Grand Duke gave it to me." Hearing this, Pauline's eyes went even wider, excitement radiating from her as she leaned forward and blurted out, "What? Don't lie. Are they looking for an archery instructor there? Tell me." Her voice carried the thrill of imagining herself among the nobles. Derrick didn't respond to her eager outburst. He simply remained seated, letting the brief commotion fade. After a few moments, the scene settled into calm. The spellbook lay open in front of him, and he read it carefully, his focus unbroken. Without looking up, he asked in his usual composed tone, "Any requests come in recently?" Pauline, exhausted from the earlier excitement, had already curled up nearby, fast asleep. From behind the counter, Jiden blinked in surprise. "You're taking requests already, just after returning?" Derrick's calm voice answered, "Yes, if it's something light. Like a simple subjugation. I feel I've lost a bit of my edge." Jiden shook his head with a confident grin. "Please. You losing your edge? Don't be ridiculous. There's always a shortage of mages in this line of work. If you want work, there's more than enough to go around." Derrick closed the book slightly, his tone decisive. "Then I want to start tomorrow. As soon as possible." The next morning arrived swiftly. Derrick and Pauline traveled together along the winding road toward their destination, beginning their mission. As they ventured deeper into the untamed wilderness, they encountered monsters along the way. At one point, they fought off a group of goblins, and later, a massive, terrifying spider attacked. With skill and coordination, they overcame each threat, pressing onward deeper into the dangerous wilds. As night settled over the land, Derrick and Pauline finally found a quiet spot to rest. Pauline let out a deep breath, relaxing after the exhausting day of battles, while Derrick remained entirely focused on something else. Even in the calm of the evening he bent his attention to the spellbook, attempting to master the intricacies of third circle magic. Sitting in quiet concentration he tried to control his mana and form the proper magical flow. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though he had succeeded, but then, a sudden explosion ripped through the night. The blast was enormous, lighting up the darkness and shaking the surroundings. Clearly, something had gone wrong with the spell. Undeterred, Derrick sat back down, carefully studying the spellbook again. He observed numerous intricate patterns and complex magical circles that had previously escaped his understanding. With steely determination, he continued his analysis, committed to mastering them. Days turned into weeks, and the story of their journey progressed alongside the slow passage of seasons. The landscape shifted with time, until winter finally arrived, covering the land in snow and filling the air with a biting chill. Eventually, Derrick and Pauline returned from their long expedition. The moment they stepped into the tavern, Pauline shivered and complained loudly. "It's freezing. How much colder can it possibly get?" Jaiden laughed warmly from behind the counter. "It's good to be young. You went all the way to the Camp Mountains and back in this weather." Derrick quietly placed the spoils of their hunt on the counter while Pauline muttered in frustration. "I kept telling him to wait until it warmed up." Jaiden glanced at the items and shook his head with disbelief and amusement. "You two are the only ones crazy enough to bring back a harpy's head in weather like this." Derrick responded calmly, "Thank you. I feel alive again." Jaiden smiled slightly at that and continued. "Since you've worked so hard, you'll probably rest tomorrow. But a request came in that's perfectly suited to you." Derrick's interest piqued. "What kind of request?" he asked. Jaiden explained, his voice steady. "It's a simple but expensive one. The Royal Mercenary Corps on West Street sent it over. You've heard of Count Belliard, right? They need a commoner for magic sparring, a punching dummy, essentially. You just go, take a few hits, and that's it." The scene shifted to the Nobles District, at a grand magic sparring arena. The facility was large, immaculately maintained, clearly designed for the training of noble mages. Inside, an elderly instructor stood beside a young girl with striking red hair. Curiosity shone in her eyes as she asked, "So, who am I sparring with today?" The old man replied calmly, "We've arranged for a commoner. The purpose is to practice offensive magic." The girl, named Elmi, frowned in disbelief. "What? You're telling me to beat up a commoner?" The instructor answered firmly, "This is part of your training. We've promised the commoner fair compensation, so you may practice freely." Elmi crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed. "Yeah, sure. So this practice is just me beating the hell out of a commoner. Typical nobles." The instructor attempted to justify the arrangement. "Still, the commoner is capable of handling one-star magic." Elmi raised an eyebrow, a hint of pride in her voice. "Teacher, I'll be 2-star soon." A moment later, Elmi frowned, muttering to herself, "Isn't the gap between 1-star and 2-star like heaven and earth?" The scene then shifted fully into the sparring arena. Derrick was already there, sitting quietly, waiting for his opponent. Calm and composed, he gave no sign of nervousness or anticipation. The quiet tension was broken as a figure stepped in front of him. It was the red-haired girl from earlier. She studied him with curiosity and asked, "Are you the one I'm sparring with today?" Derrick responded calmly, introducing himself in a measured tone. After listening, she nodded slightly and replied, "I'm Elmi." As the name lingered in her mind, a faint sense of familiarity stirred. "Derrick, that name sounds familiar, where have I heard it before?" She wondered silently, her curiosity piqued. Before she could dwell on it further, the old instructor spoke, bringing their attention back to the match. "All right, let's head to the arena." As they walked, Elmi's gaze remained fixed on Derrick, her thoughts racing. Is he really a mage? Why does he look so young? The question lingered, but she quickly pushed it aside, focusing on the match ahead. Once they reached the center of the arena, she straightened her posture and centered her attention on him, her expression sharpening with determination. Looking directly at Derrick, she asked, "Do you know the basic etiquette of magic sparring?" Derrick nodded calmly, his voice steady. "Yes, I know the basics." Elmi gave a brief nod of approval. "Good. Resist as much as you can. I'll try to finish this quickly." Even as she spoke, her mind continued calculating. "Yeah, I'll go easy if I have to, but if I unleash a shockwave and blast him out of bounds, it'll be over in seconds." Derrick considered her words carefully before responding, resist as much as I can. Exactly. How much resistance do you expect from me? Elmi blinked in confusion and irritation. What? What kind of question is that? Calmly, Derrick explained, I need to know how much effort I should put in to make this helpful for you. The instructor nearby listened quietly, observing the exchange. Elmi couldn't help but smile at his unusual approach. Shaking her head slightly, she said, You have a strange way of speaking. Just resist with everything you've got. Hearing her words, a faint smile touched Derrick's lips. At the same moment, energy began to flow around him, coalescing as he readied himself for the sparring session. With quiet confidence, he said, As you command.